Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Florida, you beautiful, beautiful state, you. This is the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, our next president, signing an executive order yesterday.
Now today, I'm going to let the legislatures come up. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to sign the bill. It's effective July 1st. I'll also sign an executive order pursuant to that bill, invalidating all remaining local emergency COVID orders effective on July 1st. But then to bridge the gap between then and now, I'm going to suspend, under my executive power, the local emergency orders as it relates to COVID. I think that's the evidence-based thing to do. I think the fact... I think folks that are saying that they need to be policing people at this point, if you're saying that, you really are saying you don't believe in the vaccines.
Oh, it's fantastic. I watched the whole press conference yesterday. He talked about how this law and this executive order protects people, which is interesting because for the whole year and a half, we've talked about the need to protect people from COVID, but that's not what he's talking about. There's no more risk from COVID, as I'll talk about in just a second here with some numbers, actual CDC numbers. This bill doesn't protect people from COVID. That's not even a threat anymore. This bill, an executive order in Florida, protects the liberties and the rights of the people. That's what he means by protecting the people. He means protecting the people from government, which is exactly what our Constitution was meant to do, because that's what's under assault right now. Our liberties and our freedoms, that's what needs protecting. And Florida leading the way. You may have just seen Washington, D.C., just yesterday, banned dancing at weddings. But if you read the real executive order from the mayor of D.C., it doesn't just ban dancing, it bans standing. I don't know why that's not making more of the headlines. You're not allowed to stand at a wedding in Washington, D.C., because you know, science. Okay, here's the number you need to know. This is all you need to know right now when it comes to the numbers. And when you don't wear your mask somewhere and some mask Nazi comes up and tells you to put it on, this is all you need to tell them, okay? These are from the CDC, these numbers. There are 87 million people who have been vaccinated. 7,157 have experienced what's called a breakthrough infection. Now, a breakthrough infection is when you get vaccinated, you wait 14 days, and then if you get COVID again. Now, that's only an infection. There's a difference between getting COVID and getting sick from COVID. People don't make that distinction a lot, but those are two very, very different things. So that's 7,000 people who get infected. That's not 7,000 people who got sick. Of those 7,000 who had a breakthrough infection, it's 498. We'll call it 500. 500 people have been hospitalized and 88 died. So, vaccinated people, here's the number you need to know. Vaccinated people have a 0.0005% chance of hospitalization and a 0.0001% chance of dying from COVID. That is decimal point, 3 zeros and 1. That's your chance of dying, okay? If you're vaccinated, and you are worried about getting sick from COVID or dying from COVID, you're not thinking. You're not thinking, you're feeling. I don't want to be rude. You might be mentally ill. There's like a mental illness at this point. Here's what I mean. If you were walking down the street and you saw someone on the courthouse steps screaming and freaking out about how worried they are that they're gonna get hit by a meteor, right? They're freaking out, they're running all over the place. Maybe they're cowering in like desperate actual fear. And you're like, oh, wow, what's wrong? And he's like, I'm gonna get hit by a meteor's gonna hit me at any minute, You would think they're crazy. You may even call police and have like, hey, there's someone here who thinks he's gonna get hit by a meteor and he's kind of going loco, and you may want to put him on a mental health hold for his and other people's safety, right? And the police would come and they'd want to help this person. But then they'd see that you're vaccinated and still wearing a mask outside, and they may put you on a mental health hold because that guy has a greater risk of being hit by a meteor than you do of getting COVID. 0.0001. And everyone's living in absolute fear still. And people who are vaccinated and still wearing masks, you're a bunch of sheep. This is the President of the United States on the Today Show. Now, a couple things to pay attention to in this clip. First, what he says. But remember when was it? When did we do it? I forget why we did it. But, 60 Minutes. It was the Ron DeSantis hit piece on 60 Minutes. Speaking of DeSantis. Whenever you're watching the news like this, always watch for the jump cuts. So a jump cut is when the angle's here, and then the angle's here, and the angle's here, and then back here again. Whenever you watch an interview like this, they'll put the camera on Joe Biden, he's talking, blah, 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 blah. And then they put the camera on the guy asking the questions, and he's like, yes. And then they jump back to Joe Biden. They edited something out. They edited out some audio. So I first saw this clip, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of jump cuts. So you also got to wonder, what did they take out of this response as well? So pay attention to that too. Here it is.
CDC guidance this week about outdoor mask wearing. A lot of folks excited that they can now shed these masks if they've been double vaccinated. Are you going to be one of these folks now? We no longer going to see the President of the United States outside with a mask on?
Sure. I mean, but what I'm going to do, though, because the likelihood of my being able to be outside and people not come up to me is not very, very high. So it's like, look, you and I took our masks off when I came in because look at the distance we are. But if we were, in fact, sitting there talking to one another close, I'd have my mask on and I bet you'd have a mask, even though we've both been vaccinated. And so it's a small precaution to take that has a profound impact. It's a patriotic responsibility, for God's sake. It's making sure that your wife...
Jump cut. See these other jump cuts there? So, a lot of jump cuts. Second thing, this is politics, right? Biden has to be as obsessive about masks as Trump was dismissive about masks. See how that goes? And as dismissive as, that they wouldn't say it like that, as negligent as Ron DeSantis is being. Now the left has to push back twice as hard and double down twice as much to go against what Florida's doing. Because heaven forbid we do anything like Florida. Right? Does that make sense though? Like if Trump was dismissive about masks, then Biden has to be obsessive about masks. It's been like that for years now with Trump, right? When Trump banned travel from China, right? Biden came out against it. Right? Just not for any scientific reason or legitimate reason. It was just pure politics. Anything that Trump was for, Biden had to be against. Called it xenophobic, remember? Well, just last week, President Biden banned travel from India. Is that xenophobic? Joe Biden, why? Ooh. Wait a second. Joe Biden banned travel from India? Am I hearing that right? Wow. Biden, why do you hate brown people so much? I'm literally shaking. I can't believe what's happening to my country. That we would have such a racist president against brown people. Mr. President, what message does this send to brown children in America? That our president would ban brown people from America. I've never seen anything so xenophobic. I'm literally shaking. When it comes to school closings, no correlation between schools closed and the amount of COVID in that area. There's a perfect correlation between a school being closed and the political leanings of that area, whether or not you voted for Trump. If you hate Trump, your schools are closed. This is all virtue signaling. There's no science anywhere within 1,000 miles of these decisions. Third point, we were told 100 days, right? Biden said first 100 days, we're gonna wear masks for 100 days. And now here it is, your patriotic responsibility to wear one forever, even if you're vaccinated. People have lost their minds. Everyone are sheep. Everyone I talk to who's wearing masks, I still see people wearing masks in their car alone. People walking down the sidewalk alone wearing masks. Like and everyone I talk to, they say, oh, well, the CDC says. Give me a break, the CDC. CDC's been wrong every step of the way. And they have no skin in the game. I've been so discouraged by how many people will mindlessly do whatever the government tells them to do. Despite all the scientific data, despite all the common sense, all because the CDC says. That's all it takes? You're telling me that's all it is? Every time I don't wear a mask somewhere, at the manager of the grocery store or whatever, ends up, hey, you got to do this. I say, why did we need to do this? Well, CDC says. CDC says. You don't even know what the CDC stands for. You're telling me what the CDC says? Because I'll give you some CDC numbers, as we just did a second ago. It'll never end. It'll never end until you end it. And everyone is so scared to do anything to end it, except for Ron DeSantis, thank goodness. A couple other governors as well leading the way. So here in California, at least, and maybe you're in Michigan or whatever states that are still doing this stuff, it's going to go on forever. Because, again, I hear people say stuff like, well, there hasn't been as many flu cases this year, so masks are great. Maybe we should wear masks all the time. No, we cannot live in a country where you have to wear a mask everywhere you go all the time, nonstop. This is insane. Why are people falling for this? It's because we live in a godless society. I love this clip here from one of our friends, Spencer Clavin. Here it is.
Deeper level, what we are really fighting is a fight between belief in the real God and belief in the God of government. You can prove this very, very easily if you just listen to what our new leaders are saying. In Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser declared Anthony Fauci Day with great pomp and circumstance for the man who has led us through this trying time and been a force for light. Anthony Fauci Day is on the birthday of Anthony Fauci, which is December 24th, right? No mention of this was made. It's Christmas Eve, right? So they've replaced Christmas Eve with Anthony Fauci. When the Democrats won in Georgia, in the Georgia Senate race, Gretchen Whitmer tweeted out, this is the governor of Michigan, tweeted out that she was lighting prayer candles to Stacey Abrams, the failed Georgia governor candidate. You can watch this happening everywhere. And the riots of summer 2020, when people were being demanded to kneel and recite racialist dogmas and creeds, right? The fact of the matter is that, as Chesterton says, right, human beings worship. We hold something in the highest possible esteem. And remove God from that place, and you worship the most powerful thing. And the most powerful thing is the government.
So good. You end up worshiping the most powerful thing, and the most powerful. I can't do it. It doesn't matter. Like if you say vaccinated people don't need to wear masks anymore. Well, the CDC says. Hey, kids don't get COVID. Well, Biden says. Hey guys, masks are completely useless. Can we at least agree we don't need to wear them outside anymore? Well, Fauci says. CDC, Biden, Fauci, these are the people of science. Right? The people who appeal to that authority, they call themselves the people of science. I saw this picture that someone posted. This guy's holding a sign. It's hard to read. It says, that was me, actually, the beginning of the pandemic, just super jacked. It says, weak, low-status males love COVID because it allows them to LARP, live-action role play, pretend to be heroes by simply wearing a mask, taking a shot, and harassing other people. They can pretend to be strong, virtuous heroes, while being frail, fearful, flabby, pathetic, cowards. Ooh, it's a bit strong, but there's truth to it. Now there's truth to it. Months ago, pre-vaccine, no, different story. Post-vaccine, yeah. And that flabby part is actually the part that we actually need to talk about. 78% of people who were in the hospital or died from COVID were obese. And I'm sure many more, if they weren't obese, also were very unhealthy by choices that they made, and then the rest were old. But that's for a different day. The point is, post-vaccine, everyone's lost their minds because they're worshiping government. They're worshiping government, they're worshiping Fauci, they're worshiping the CDC. Trump's the Antichrist. So they have to be for masks forever because Trump was against them. They have to be for masks forever because DeSantis in Florida is against them. Companies have to be for masks forever because they want to CYA themselves from lawsuits, and they can't go against the vaulted CDC. This is much bigger than masks, though. Check out this propaganda poster from England in 1929. You see the socialism would mean inspectors all around. I think we have those all around us. Put your mask back on. And here are all these nosy people looking inside someone's house. And it says, if you want to call your soul your own, if you want to call your soul your own, vote conservative. We are at a point today where masks are a metaphor. If you want to call your soul your own, you have to be conservative. But instead, we're at this point where if you're the one person in the grocery store who won't wear a mask, you have no power in numbers, right? Now the manager's like, oh, here's that one annoying guy back again without his mask. But if half the people would just stop wearing a mask at the grocery store, then the manager would listen and stop making everyone do it. Here's what's annoying. It's more than annoying, it's super concerning. We used to be a people who took risks. We used to be a people who didn't follow blindly the orders of our wise government overlords. What the heck happened to us? That's been the real virus. It sucked the life and freedom right out of us. And that's why I'm so grateful for Ron DeSantis. That's the true story of this whole thing, right? Ron DeSantis nailed it. He said, this is a bill that protects people, protects our lives, protects our freedoms. Coming up next, I want to make the point that you're not that guy. What guy? You need to be that guy, but you can't be that guy until you admit you're not that guy. What guy are you talking about? I'll tell you next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Side Crusaders, I want to expand on this idea that we used to be a people in America who took risks. We're a risk-taking culture. And we used to be a culture that would tell the government to go pound sand. We're not that anymore. Now we must accept zero risk. No risk is allowed. Even if there's a 0.0001% chance that after you're vaccinated, you'll die from COVID. 0.0001, right? That's the chance that a single virus particle might land on your nose when you go outside. Too high, too high. I will not go outside, and I'll ban you from going outside too. You know, in Europe, a lot of countries, they still have curfews. Curfews, why? Why have a curfew? This is control, and that's Europe. Europe's bad. We're supposed to be better. But we've accepted far, far too much already. Again, I know we've talked a lot about COVID lately, but it's more than that. The masks are a metaphor. I'm not talking about masks. It's all kinds of mandates that are cut to go. Well, vaccines are the next big battle, right? We'll get to that another day. But even apart from COVID, people just blindly doing whatever the government tells them to do. This should be very concerning to everyone. Let me make a very dramatic example to prove the point. Maybe you've seen this picture before. If you haven't, here it is. That is at a Nazi rally. It's at a Hitler rally. You can see that circled person there, circled gentleman. He's the only one in the crowd not giving the Nazi salute, not giving the Hitler salute. It looks like some sort of parade's going by, perhaps. I don't know the exact background behind this whole picture here, but it looks like Hitler's going to drive on by and everyone's giving the Hitler Nazi salute, right? Except for that guy. That guy's not. And the point of this picture, whenever anyone shows it, is you need to be that guy. Now here's the problem. Everyone looks at that picture and thinks that they are indeed that guy. They think that in a crowd of people, they'd be the only one not giving the Hitler salute. So I'm here to tell you, by the way, great graphic on the side here, guys. That's fantastic. I'm here to tell you you're not that guy. You're this guy. You're much more this guy than that guy. So first thing, maybe that guy did give the Nazi salute. Like maybe he just had an itch or something and he put his arm down for a second or his arm got tired. He was doing this. Oh, I shouldn't even do that because someone's going to freeze frame that. Great. Someone's doing the salute and then they're like, oh, my arm's tired. He put his arm down and then they took a picture and he put it right back up. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that wasn't as triumphant and brave of a moment as we think it is. But let's say it was, right? This is the point. You're not that guy. And I want to quote the Woke Temple on Twitter. He said the same thing. You're not that guy. I'm not this guy. None of us is this guy. if you think you're this guy, that's a problem. In fact, the first step to being this guy is to say, I'm not that guy. I'm the other guy, the one with his hand in the air. My father taught me that when I was 10 years old. He said we were learning about World War II in school. And I told him that if I were a German, I would have been one of the few fighting the Nazis, and our family would have hidden the Jews. And this guy's dad said, don't be so sure. Our family has pretty mainstream values. If it was 1938, we'd probably be good little Nazis too, just like everyone else. The first step to being that guy is to realize you're not that guy. Jordan Peterson makes this point all the time. I really think it's one of the most important realizations you could ever make. Because if you don't, you go on in life thinking you're great and thinking that you'll never be susceptible to the bad things that go on in society and to the manipulations that people impose on you. But if you realize that, wow, I could be very easily manipulated and I very easily could be that guy saluting Hitler as he goes down the street, then you can start to take the necessary precautions to make sure you don't be that person. Does that make sense? It's essential you realize that you are not that guy. It's the first step into not being that guy, is to realize you are that guy. We've talked before about this book, Ordinary Men. It's about a group of German policemen who were sent to Poland. This was, they grew up before the Hitler Youth were a thing, right? So they weren't raised with this propaganda. They knew differently. And when they got to Poland, they were doing more and more and more terrible things. And before they knew it, they were shooting naked pregnant women in the back of the head in the woods. And the key to this story is they were told that they could leave whenever they wanted. They didn't have to do this, but they didn't leave because they didn't think leaving would be comradely. It wouldn't be comradely to leave the other guy behind to do the dirty work while they go back home. It's really the most powerful drive there is wanting to fit in, going along with the pack. These men, they were made physically ill with what they were doing. Right? They were physically and emotionally distraught at the horrible things that they were doing when they were in Poland. But they kept doing it. They kept doing it because they didn't want to leave the pack. And I guarantee you, if you ask them what kind of person they were, they'd tell you they were a great person. And they would never do these horrible things. But then they would justify it all day long. People end up doing terrible things, and it's always one step at a time. So you need to watch every step very carefully. And I don't think people are watching themselves very carefully when they're obeying every single guideline from the CDC. I don't think they're watching themselves when they just obey. So there's a couple points here. First is the incrementalism of it all, right? The question is, have we been locked down for so long and everyone's been driven into their political corner so hard that we forget what freedom looks like? I genuinely think people are terrified to go outside. I think people are afraid of freedom. A lot of people around the world are, but we've always loved it here. I don't know if we do anymore. Right? I talk to all these people who wear masks and they say they prefer wearing masks. Better safe than sorry. Or I do it to help other people. Aren't you wonderful? I'm worried now what people won't do. Better safe than sorry, they'll say. Or I do it to help other people. The world's worst atrocities have been justified the exact same way. Better safe than sorry. I'm doing it to help. There's another thing that happened in Nazi Germany, since we're on it, and I got 2 minutes here. Hitler was obsessed with order and cleanliness. That was just his personality. Those were his personality traits. He was very sensitive to disgust. Everyone has a disgust mechanism in their brain. It's why you don't eat rotten food, right? Rotten meat, it smells bad or whatever, right? Everyone has a defense mechanism. It's a personality trait. But Hitler was extremely sensitive to it. And if you're disgusted by something, then you want to eradicate it. If you're afraid of something, you run away from it. But if you're disgusted by something, you want to eliminate it completely. And there's a book about, it's written about Hitler's just like dinner table discussions that he's had with people around the dinner. So not as opposed to his big speeches. And just in casual conversation with people, he would always refer to other people as parasites and rats and insects and all these very dehumanizing things. When Hitler first came to power, he started, one of the first things he did was this mass public health initiative. He gave vaccine against tuberculosis, this massive vaccine program against tuberculosis, which was a great thing, right? But we got to make people healthy. Then he went on a campaign to beautify the factories, right? So he went to all the dirty factories in Germany and he said, all right, listen, guys, we got to increase people's hygiene. I want to clean this place up. We're going to get rid of the rats and the insects. We're going to plant flowers out front. We're going to make everything neat and orderly. And the insecticide that they used to kill all the insects was Zyklon. That ended up being the same gas that they used in the concentration camps. It wasn't a big leap from their first use to their final use. Think about that. First, it was to clean up the factories and it was get rid of the insects and the rats. And then the mentally ill. And then the disabled. And then the gypsies and the Jews. And on and on. Last thing, people think that Hitler brainwashed the people of Germany. No. He fed off the people of Germany. He fed off the desires of the people of Germany because they desired order. They were coming out of World War I. Germans were blamed for everything. Hyperinflation hit, just coming here in America too. Everyone who saved anything lost everything. And people wanted order and they wanted someone to blame. And Hitler fed on that. And he got almost everyone to follow him. And he would have gotten you too. Now, I understand that Hitler's an overused example. Could someone please come up with a different historical parallel? But it's a very clear example of how difficult it is to stand up for what's right and how easy it is to follow the pack and be that guy. I don't want you to be that guy. It's about more than wearing a mask. It's about more than even parroting the CDC says mindlessly. I'm worried that we are no longer a fiercely independent people. I'm worried we're sheep. And sheep ultimately go to slaughter. I know that's a dramatic sentence. I'm not saying we're headed to genocide, but there's a slaughter of our souls. There's a slaughter of our way of life. There's a slaughter of the perspectives that we have of reality. There's a slaughter of how we communicate. There's a slaughter of how we, who we're allowed to question. The risks we used to take, but no longer do. A lot of those things have died. I think the pushback starts with taking your mask off, which is good because you have the science and the truth behind you. Stop being a sheep. True story. Mike Slater. We're talking about inflation coming up next. Spread the word.
If I had $1 million in stock that I bought and it made $1 million and I was going to cash it in, I'd have to pay capital gain on that $1 million. But if God forbid, on the way, go back to where I was, on the way to where we're talking about, on the way to cash in my stock, I got hit by a car and got killed, I can leave it to my daughter and she pays no tax. A tax that was owed 2 seconds earlier. It's not an inheritance tax. The tax was owed two seconds earlier.
Wow, that's so weird. So the first thing to note in order for us to make sense of that clip there is it's a classic progressive move where they believe that they own all the money. So all the money's theirs, and they're nice enough to let you have some, right? And now you owe it back to us. It's ours. You owe it. But you can get around giving it back. But right? Like that's the first mental trip to get over there. John Carney saw that clip from Breitbart, and he coined this the Grim Reaper tax, which is beautiful. Well done, John. How are you, brother?
Thank you very much. It was inspired, frankly, by that super weird story that Biden tells us, where he says he imagines this horrible family tragedy of a father getting killed. I mean, before I get to the horrible part, can we talk about how weird it is that Biden imagines you get in a car or walk down the street, whichever it is, on your way to cash in your stocks, where would you go to cash in your stocks? What physical place do you have? Is there a stock? Delaware is an interesting state. Maybe, nearby, he has a stock shop. It's like right next door to where Hunter Biden's laptop was, right?
Yeah, well, when he was a kid, when Joe Biden was a kid in 1858, maybe there was a stock store down the street
you went
by the
running down the street with your stocks in hand, and you're like, I have them. You hope you didn't get mugged by corn pop on the way, and you're like, here. But then he comes up with this really dark story of the guy getting killed and his daughter inheriting the stocks. And that to Biden is a really good way of telling the story of somebody unjustly inheriting too much money. This is the least sympathetic version of inheritance that I could possibly come up with. And it literally brought to me the Grim Reaper tax, right? You have somebody, dead on the street. And Biden's first thought is, we got to make sure we tax that guy. We got to get our share of that money.
Wow, that's so okay. So there's a dead guy on the street, and the government's first thought is, what stocks does he own? We need to tax him now before they give that stock to a family member. Wow, that is so messed up.
In my mind, I see like literally the Grim Reaper with the sickle and the big dark gown, with also a bag where he's like collecting his share of the money. Right? He's the Grim Reaper from the IRS saying,
so screwed up. That's like perverted. That's messed up. Okay, so let's talk about the capital gains tax itself, because Biden the other day talked about raising it from 20% to, what was he talking about?
Well, 40? He wants to raise it to 39.6%, but then it would be even higher than that because there's an additional Obamacare tax on top of that. So the richest people would actually end up paying over 40%. And if you add in like New York and California state capital gains taxes, it ends up being 50 to 57%.
That's crazy. So what are the ramifications of that for everybody? Because we always think fat cats, right? Everyone's thinking about Bill Gates, who's now half as wealthy as the other day, but everyone's thinking about Bill Gates and all the rest. What about, how does that affect the regular person who maybe doesn't even have any money in the stock market, although everyone does with a 401k, but you know what I mean?
Right. So what I would say is the first place to start is with a family business, because what a capital gains tax is not, it doesn't just apply to stocks. It can apply to real estate that you might own. It applies to businesses that you might own. And the gain over time in the value of that business, if you ever try to sell it, you get a capital gains tax.
I did not know that on a business.
Yes. So if you started a company and it's expanded and you get credit for the capital you put in, but if your hard work has made it worth more over time, that's going to count as a capital gains, even though it was your work that made it worth more. And so what you will end up with is paying a tax. So this doesn't just help, hurt the people who have a lot of money in the stock market. It hurts people who have, maybe grown their business over time and over generations. And that's why actually Biden wants to do this step up, because one of the ways you can avoid the capital gains tax is by not cashing out, just holding and saving your money, which a lot of us think would be a good thing. But the problem is that the government doesn't get its share until you sell. So what a lot of people do is they hold their business or their stock portfolio and pass it on to the next generation. When you do that, you actually start from more or less zero again, meaning the fair value is assigned at the time of death, and the kids only pay the tax on the gain after the death. So Biden doesn't like that because it will encourage people not to realize their gains. So what he wants to do is make sure that you owe the capital gains tax all the way back to the time your father or your grandfather first made the investment or started the business.
Wow, that is so screwed up. I think this is the most immoral of all the taxes, right? I mean, you got the death tax, and now you got your Grim Reaper tax. And I love the branding of these, obviously, because usually the left does a good job of it. So I'm grateful that you got in front of them on this one. But this one has to be the most destructive. I just imagine if we got rid of our capital gains tax, or, geez, I'll even compromise and make it 5%, although it should be 0. We would be the tax haven of the world. right? Like economic growth would be through the roof, wouldn't it?
It really punishes people who are investing both for their future and in businesses. It discourages you from building up the value of a business that you've created. Of course, now you're probably going to do it anyway. I don't want to say like, oh, nobody will start a business. People will do it, but it will discourage you. It will discourage you from investing even more because as the taxes go higher and higher, your returns go lower. And remember, all of these capital investments, you're taking on risk. And so one of the justifications traditionally for taxing capital lower than income is that when you're working at a job and you're getting a wage, you get a check every 2 weeks, you have a little risk. You might get fired, but you're not putting your own capital at risk. So one of the ideas was, in order to encourage risk taking, we'll tax it at a lower rate. What Biden wants to do is bring it right back up to the income level, which will definitely discourage people from taking risks with their capital. And that means starting less businesses, investing less in businesses that are starting, and putting less money into the stock market that creates wealth for their future generation.
Yes. Oh, very well said. John Carney, well done. But that's that's less perspective, right? Like you didn't build that. So why would they tax it less? They don't think you built it anyway, and they don't think it's your money to begin with. They think it's theirs. John Carney at Breitbart. Go read everything he writes. John, appreciate your insight.
Thanks for having me, man. I'd love being on.
Yeah, let's do it again. I think we need to call every tax that exists, we need to rebrand it as some version of the death tax, the Grim Reaper tax, the funeral tax, the casket tax, the 6 feet under tax, or whatever. Every tax needs to have some death line associated with it. Coming up next, talk about the Second Amendment, Supreme Court case, or the Supreme Court decided to take a case in the next few months here, which has a lot of hope to it for people who support the Second Amendment. Coming up next, spread the word.
We need more Senate Republicans to join the overwhelming majority of Democratic colleagues and close the loopholes required in background check purchases of guns. We need a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. This shouldn't be a red or blue issue. And no amendment to the Constitution is absolute.
That's such an amazing line. What part of shall not be infringed does he not understand? Amy Swearer is here, one of our favorite guests, most knowledgeable about the Second Amendment. She's a legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Amy, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So that's pretty amazing. No amendment is absolute. What's he trying to say here?
Well, so I think he's getting at a line from a couple of Second Amendment cases that the majority used, that the Second Amendment is not unlimited. And in that capacity, it wasn't talking about completely banning certain semi-automatic rifles or, making it impossible for you to lend a gun to someone without going and paying a gun store to run a background check or things of that nature. It was talking about, maybe you can't carry a gun into the Capitol complex or into your judicial hearing, very, very limited things like that. But to say that it's not absolute. Could you imagine if we applied that to like the 13th Amendment? Yeah, no. The ban on slavery, totally not absolute. Like this isn't. It's just simply not, one, the right wording that he was looking for, and two, because he's using the wrong wording, it gets into some just absolutely stunning implications that the amendments don't mean what they actually say. That's the whole point.
Wow, you're so right about other amendments that are not, like, what else do we want to be not absolute? So obviously he's talking about the first and the second, right? But you're right. What if we applied that to the other ones?
I tend to like the 19th Amendment, the ones giving me the right to vote as a woman, those are pretty good. Let's keep these absolute.
Yeah, you're right. But what if I come back and say, well, it's not absolute, not all women or whatever. Wow, you're so right. What are these loopholes? I'm so sick of hearing about this stupid gun show loophole and all those other loopholes. Tell us how these aren't things.
Yeah, so I actually testified about this in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so generally when people are talking about, the gun show loophole or the background check loophole, what they actually are talking about is this very narrow part of the law that essentially is, if you are a private person who just wants to, sell a couple guns in your own state, like on Arms List or Craigslist, under federal law, you don't have to, because you can't just call up the FBI as a private person and be like, hey, can you run a NICS background check? So they don't make you go through the whole process of going through a gun store or an FFL. But this is a very, very small part of all background checks. If you go to any sort of gun store, if you are buying from any entity that is in the business of buying or selling guns, which is, most brick and mortar places, most places you're actually going to get your guns, you absolutely need a background check done. And so it's just, again, this very limited component that, we can talk about expanding background checks to these private intra-state sales. But the problem with things like H.R. 8, which is the universal background check bill currently before the Senate that the House passed, is that it goes far beyond that, where it would basically criminalize any temporary low-risk transfer that gun owners make all the time that are, we don't have some epidemic of, people lending hunting guns to their buddies and then that gun being used in crime. That's just not where the risk is. And so criminalizing that without paying to go, officially legally transfer your guns, it's not hitting at a core part of the problem. You're more likely to criminalize people who are making common sense transfers. People who are in, for the sake of their own mental health are saying, look, maybe I'm just going to hand my guns over to a friend or a family member temporarily. Saying you're a criminal, you're a felon if you don't go through and officially legally transfer those title to those guns by going through a federal background check. It's just an absurd overreach. I like to say it's like taking someone with a sprained ankle and saying we're going to treat that sprained ankle by cutting off your leg. It just creates a whole host of other problems.
Do we have any data at all about how many crimes are committed by guns that are transferred to family members or sold by a hobbyist at a gun show or anything like that?
So we have some data, and what we know is that the overwhelming majority of, when you ask people who have been arrested with guns, using guns to commit their crimes, the vast majority of those went through what we call the black market of gun sales. So they're buying or lending guns from people who already know that these individuals are either going to use them in crime or are prohibited persons to begin with. And this is already against the law. Even if you're a friend or family member and you're lending a gun to someone who can't have that gun or you suspect is going to commit a crime, this is already criminal to do that. And these are already people who are continuing to break those laws, who are going to continue to break those laws, even if you put another mandate on them and say, well, no, now really you do have to go through a background check. They're going to ignore it anyway. It's not... The overwhelming part of the problem is not being addressed by this, and the parts that are being addressed are easily circumvented.
Great point. We only got a minute. Tell me about the Supreme Court case that the Supreme Court decided to take up and how this is different than the Heller decision from 12 years ago.
So Heller at its core was just about, is there an individual right to keep and bear arms? Does it really mean the people, you as individuals have a right to keep and bear arms? But it didn't go beyond that. It didn't address, is there a right when the Second Amendment says to bear arms, does it actually mean a right to bear arms outside the home? So that's what this case is about. It goes after New York City's very, very restrictive, almost impossible to get concealed carry permitting system. These individuals were denied concealed carry permits, even though they were ordinary law-abiding citizens who had gone through pretty extensive training. So that's the question. Do these individuals, ordinary Americans, actually have a right to bear arms like the Constitution says?
I'm hopeful about it. I got 15 seconds. If the Supreme Court rules properly on that, would it apply to the whole country, you believe, or just New York?
So theoretically, we're hoping it should apply to the whole country. We're hoping it isn't very narrow, but I think there's enough there that we could get a pretty broad ruling that would apply nationwide.
Wow, that'd be amazing. Amy Swearer, grateful for you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
At the Heritage Foundation. It's our show. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. We'll see you tomorrow.